In the heart of a sun-scorched desert, where golden dunes stretched endlessly under a blistering sky, a camel named Shaheen trudged wearily through the sand. Once a proud member of a bustling caravan, Shaheen had somehow drifted away during a violent sandstorm that swept across the region days ago. The wind had howled like a wild beast, blinding everyone in its path and scattering even the most experienced travelers. Alone now, with no sign of his companions, Shaheen wandered aimlessly across the barren landscape. The sun, a relentless ball of fire overhead, showed no mercy. His hooves burned with each step on the heated sand, and his body, once strong and regal, had become frail from days without water or food. Flies buzzed around his cracked lips as he struggled to find even a hint of shade in the wide, unforgiving emptiness. Eventually, his legs gave out beneath him, and with a heavy thud, he collapsed beside a weathered rock formation that offered the only shadow in sight. Gasping, barely conscious, he lay there, vulnerable and forgotten by the world. As the hours passed and the desert wind whispered across the dunes, hope seemed to drift further away. But far off on a rocky ledge, a lone shepherd scanned the horizon with a pair of dusty binoculars, searching for his lost sheep. His eyes narrowed as he noticed a faint shape slumped near the base of a dune. It barely moved, but something told him it wasn't just a shadow. Climbing onto his motorbike, he raced across the uneven terrain, sand whipping into his face. As he drew closer, his heart sank. The figure was a camel, emaciated and clearly injured. The shepherd had seen many animals in the desert, but something about this one made him pause. Shaheen raised his head weakly, locking eyes with the man, as if silently pleading for help. The shepherd immediately reached for his satellite phone, knowing there was no time to lose. In a calm but urgent voice, he contacted the nearest desert rescue unit, giving them the coordinates and describing the camel's dire condition. The man then sat beside the fallen animal, gently brushing sand from its fur, whispering in a low, soothing tone. "Don't worry," he murmured, "help is coming." The desert, once silent and cruel, now held a fragile promise. Perhaps this creature, left for dead, had a chance to live again. And somewhere in the vast skies above, the buzz of a distant rotor began to grow louder. The rescue alert spread quickly across the communications tower of the Desert Response Unit. Within minutes, a high-priority mission was activated. A camel, stranded deep in the dunes, injured and clinging to life. The coordinates were remote, barely reachable by road, so the team opted for an airlift. A green and white rescue helicopter was prepped for launch, while an ambulance followed a rugged desert trail on the ground. 3 rescuers boarded the aircraft: Rafiq, the calm and experienced lead technician; Majid, the silent muscle of the group; and Ikram, passionate and often loud, with a heart too big for protocol. As the chopper sliced through the shimmering desert air, the gravity of the mission weighed on them. This wasn't just another animal retrieval, this was a fight against time, heat, and despair. On the ground, the shepherd who had made the call stayed beside the camel, now barely moving. He placed a scarf over the camel's eyes to block the sun, and every few minutes whispered words of comfort to the silent creature. When the rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon, kicking up a storm of dust as it landed nearby, he stood and waved his arms in relief. The 3 rescuers quickly assessed the scene. Shaheen's body trembled slightly, showing signs of dehydration and muscle collapse. "We don't have long," Rafiq said as he pulled the specialized lifting harness from a pack. Majid moved efficiently, positioning foam pads under the camel's limbs to avoid injury during liftoff. Ikram, pacing nearby, looked at the shepherd and then at Shaheen, his face red with frustration. "How long has this poor animal been out here? Why wasn't this reported earlier? This is beyond neglect," he shouted, though his anger wasn't aimed at the shepherd, it was against a system that often overlooked such suffering. Despite the heat, they worked as a unit, sweat pouring down their faces, voices calm but urgent. As they secured the harness, Rafiq placed his hand gently on Shaheen's neck, feeling the faint pulse. "Still fighting," he whispered. The helicopter pilot gave them the signal, and the steel cable was lowered from above. In synchronized movements, they clipped the harness, checked all supports, and stepped back. As the rotor blades thundered above, Shaheen was gently lifted from the ground, his limp body swaying slightly in the air. The team kept their hands on him until the very last second, guiding his position, making sure no injury worsened in the transition. Below, the shepherd watched with misty eyes, holding his cap to his chest in silent gratitude. Ikram walked over and placed a hand on the shepherd's shoulder. "You saved him," he said, voice calmer now. As the helicopter rose and disappeared into the desert sky, the golden sand slowly swallowed its shadow, but in its wake, it left behind hope, unity, and a reminder that even in the harshest places on earth, compassion still soared. The roar of the helicopter's engine echoed across the desert as Shaheen was lifted into the sky, suspended by a steel cable like a fragile treasure. The harness held firm, gently cradling his exhausted body as grains of sand danced wildly below. The rescue team aboard the chopper watched every sway, every movement, making sure the camel's limbs were secure and blood flow remained steady. Inside the cabin, Rafiq kept a hand on the winch control while Majid knelt beside the harness hook, eyes locked on Shaheen's body. Ikram stood near the open hatch, scanning the ground one last time, ensuring the landing site had been properly cleared. Below them, the shepherd's silhouette grew smaller, his hand raised in silent farewell. The golden horizon stretched endlessly. But now the sky no longer looked empty, it carried purpose. As they soared through turbulent air, the medical crew inside the chopper prepared IV fluids and cooling pads. The rescue wasn't over yet. Shaheen's breathing was shallow, his muscles twitching slightly with every jolt of air pressure. "We're losing time," Rafiq murmured, glancing at the monitor clipped to the makeshift medical pack. But Majid, ever silent, simply leaned closer to the camel and placed a hand gently on its side, grounding him with steady warmth. The pilot veered slightly east to avoid a dust plume, his voice crackling through the headset, ETA 10 minutes to field facility. In those 10 minutes, no one blinked. The cabin was silent except for the rhythmic hum of blades slicing through the heat. Ikram paced in a crouch, his earlier frustration now replaced by pure worry. "Hold on, buddy," he whispered toward the camel, a quiet plea in a sky filled with noise. As the facility came into view, a small veterinary outpost nestled beside a dune ridge, ground personnel rushed forward with stretchers and medical tools. The helicopter descended smoothly, blowing tents and tarps back as it hovered over the landing zone. The moment the wheels touched the sand, the back doors flung open, and the rescue team sprang into motion. The steel cable was unhooked, and together, Rafiq, Majid, and Ikram guided Shaheen down onto a thick padded mat. Vets immediately surrounded the camel, checking vitals, assessing dehydration, inspecting joints. One of them whistled low under his breath. "He's lucky. A few more hours and it would have been too late." Fluids were connected, shade erected, and cooling wraps applied to his legs and neck. The team stood aside, exhausted but hopeful. Ikram leaned against the ambulance, eyes still on the camel. "We did what we could," he said, almost to himself. But as Shaheen stirred slightly, a low, dry grunt escaping his throat, even Majid cracked a rare smile. It wasn't over yet, but the worst was behind them. As the sun dipped low on the horizon and the air finally began to cool, the field camp buzzed with activity, but in the quiet space around the recovering camel, a deep calm settled. In the middle of a ruthless desert, life had been given a second chance. Weeks passed, and the desert winds softened, no longer howling with the menace they once carried. At the remote veterinary outpost, Shaheen, once a shadow of himself, now stood on his own legs beneath a shaded canopy. The team had worked tirelessly, rotating shifts to ensure he was fed, hydrated, and gradually strengthened. His eyes, once dim with exhaustion, now sparkled with a quiet resilience. Word of the miraculous camel rescue had spread across nearby towns and nomadic tribes, drawing occasional visitors who brought dates, hay, and quiet prayers. But through it all, Shaheen remained calm, his presence both majestic and solemn, like a desert spirit reborn. One morning, as the sun rose like molten gold over the dunes, the rescue team gathered for his release. Rafiq gave a silent nod, clipboard tucked under his arm, while Majid loaded the last crate of supplies into the transport trailer. Ikram, ever the emotional core of the crew, knelt beside Shaheen and gently touched his forehead. "You've got the soul of a warrior," he whispered, "but warriors don't belong in cages." With a rope tied loosely to his halter, Shaheen stepped into the open trailer without hesitation, the desert stretching out before him as if it had been waiting. The journey back to his original Migration route was long and winding, but not once did he falter. With every mile, his strength returned, muscles rippling beneath golden fur that had once sagged with weakness. They reached a wide canyon near the edge of the desert, an area known to host migrating camel herds. The team stopped the vehicle, and the gates were unlatched. Shaheen stood still for a moment, taking in the open land, ears twitching at the distant sounds of grunts and footfalls echoing in the valley. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, the sand familiar beneath his hooves, the wind now a gentle guide. The team stood back, watching silently. From over a ridge, a group of camels emerged, Shaheen's old herd. There was no galloping reunion, no cinematic charge. Just a quiet moment as the leader of the herd walked toward him and paused, recognizing the scent, the eyes, the survivor. One by one, the others followed, forming a semicircle around him, as if welcoming him back into the fold without question. Ikram wiped his eyes with the edge of his scarf. He found his way home. Rafiq patted him on the back, and even Majid gave a slow nod of approval. As the camels turned and began to move, Shaheen took one last look at the team before joining them, his steps steady, his spirit restored. The golden light wrapped around his silhouette as he disappeared into the dunes, no longer a symbol of loss but of endurance. In the silence that followed, only the wind spoke, carrying with it the story of a silent nomad, a rescue born of compassion, and a journey that stitched life back into the very heart of the desert.